My name is James Herbert. I'm the president of UNE. I've been here since I started July 1st of 2017. So I'm coming up on 8 years. I'll be completing 8 years in the role. And yeah, been living in Biddeford right here on campus since that time and absolutely love it. Love UNE, I love Biddeford and the local community, and I love Maine.
And can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your cultural background means to you?
Sure. So I grew up in a town outside of Corpus Christi, Texas. So it's funny, it's South Texas, right on the Gulf Coast, a coastal community. And people don't think I'm from Texas because I guess I don't talk like a Texan, and it's been a long, long time since I've lived there. But that is where I grew up. And it was a blue-collar, working-class, commercial fishing community. There was also a military base right nearby. And so that was where I grew up. In terms of cultural heritage, it's interesting. My family didn't have a strong identity focused on a particular ethnic heritage, perhaps because my mom was adopted. And I don't know why, but a lot of people down there are not strongly affiliated with a particular ethnic group, like Polish or Irish or Italian or African or whatever. It was just sort of, it wasn't a key piece of my identity in terms of an ethnic heritage. However, I would say that if you sort of broaden the definition of heritage to include the sort of cultural background of the community, then that absolutely did influence me. It was a working class community, valued hard work. That was a big part. I think that's a value that got instilled to me. There was a lot of Mexican immigrants, so Mexican Americans living in the area who spoke Spanish, and so that I think sort of fostered a love of languages in me, and also just a sense of appreciation of different cultures and diversity of people. So those are ways I would say that my culture of that community, not heritage in the traditional sense of a particular ethnic heritage, but my culture influenced who I am now.
How does the culture of where you grew up compare to where you are now?
So interestingly, there are many similarities. There's a sort of grittiness, I think, where I grew up. It was not a very sort of urban, effete, refined kind of place. It was pretty gritty. And again, emphasis on hard work, on straight talk, genuineness, authenticity, and not a lot of pretension and showiness. And and so I think those values, which were typified the community that I grew up in, I think they're very much part of the culture around here in Maine, right? Mainers are not, they're leery of people that are too showy and pretentious. In fact, one thing that's really interesting is if you look at very successful, very wealthy Mainers, you wouldn't know it just by looking at them. They dress just like everyone else. If you look at the homes of wealthy Mainers, they sort of are unpretentious. They're very nice, and that, no question, but they're unpretentious. If you go to Florida, for example, you see a very different culture, a very different style. And so it's something that I really appreciate about the culture here, and it's something that harkens back to where I grew up. In fact, a funny story. My first year in Maine, I got an invitation to a black tie event. It was a black tie holiday party. And I told my assistant, I said, well, I guess I need to get a tuxedo. I think I have a tuxedo, but I need to get it clean. And she said, a what? I said, a tuxedo. She goes, you'll never wear a tuxedo in Maine. I said, well, it says black tie. That must be what it means, right? Black tie event. She goes, no. In Maine, a black tie event means you get out the good flannel. And that's like, so I laughed. And sure enough, I wore not a tuxedo, but a dark black suit with a black tie and everything, and I was the most overdressed one there. So yeah, there's a sense of genuineness, authenticity, unpretentiousness that I really love here.
And are there any early memories or traditions from growing up in Texas that you still carry with you today?
I don't know. Again, it's more about the vibe, the work ethic, that sort of thing. I can't really think of any specific traditions other than just generic ones that most Americans participate in. So, no, I
Gotcha.
don't have anything there for you.
That's all right. And how has the culture that you grew up in shaped your leadership style as you've taken on the role of president of the university?
Yeah, I do think, well, first of all, I work very hard. I have a strong work ethic. I tend not to know what to do with myself when I'm not working, so I work very hard, and I think that, is part of how I grew up. I also, the appreciation for people from different backgrounds, I would say. One thing I'm very proud of at UNE is it's a very inclusive community. We have people from all over, and we have a lot of respect for people who have different lifestyles, different identities, whether that's racial, ethnic, gender identity, whatever. We're sort of like, hey, you be you do you, it's all good. It's a very accepting place. Without people being overly in your face about it. It's just kind of like there's not a lot of having to prove something. It's more just like, look, this is who I am, and I'm good with this. So I think that my appreciation for that and my value in that comes in part from the way I grew up. So there were, as I said, a lot of Mexican Americans where I grew up, but it was just sort of like it was just the way it was. People didn't. It wasn't something that a lot of attention was paid to. It just sort of, it was the way it was, and it just was part of the community.
And are there any specific partnerships or events that you've seen started on campus that you think have promoted cultural awareness?
Sure. So one of the things that is very cool is our Office of Community and Belonging sponsors a bunch of different events throughout the year. One of my favorites is this cultural, what do they call it? The Cultural Awareness Evening or something like that. And you go and there's tables set up representing all different kinds of cultures that our students, from our students' backgrounds all over the world. And they have food and they have, various, like handicrafts and that sort of thing, and just all over. And it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And so I love going to things like that. I love ethnic food of various kinds. I've asked our dining services to make sure to highlight different ethnic foods and not just have, macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets every day. I mean, of course they have that. They have to sort of stick, because some students like that, the pizza, but really to sort of highlight foods from different regions and cultures. And so we do that. That's an intentional thing that we do. And there's various other groups that do things that highlight various cultural events. And then, of course, there's celebrations like MLK Day and things like that highlight specific things. So, yeah, there's things that we do to highlight that. There's also things that we do to highlight a key important piece of our local culture here in Biddeford, our Franco-American culture, which we can talk more about as well.
Yes. So let's go further into that.
Yeah.
How has UNE kind of embedded itself into that Franco-American culture?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, a couple things that come to mind. First up is that when we talk about our history, right, at UNE, we want to make sure that people understand our history. And our history is really rooted in 3 streams, all of which, though, share some commonalities. First, you have our Franco culture, our Franco-American culture. And this comes from the establishment of St. Francis College on this campus. And that was the precursor institution to UNE was St. Francis College, which was founded initially as a high school, subsequently as a junior college, to serve the French-speaking immigrants from Quebec who came to work in the mills. And so there's some fascinating history about that community. Now, it wasn't the only community in Biddeford. There was a Jewish community, there was an Italian community, and other immigrants, sort of a melting pot in Biddeford. But the Franco community had truly a very big and distinctive impact on UNE via St. Francis College. So we talk about that a lot. And part of what makes that special is the emphasis on access to higher ed. I've talked to so many people from the alums of St. Francis College who talk about the importance of it was sort of their last resort. It was the college that allowed them to go to college, the only place that would accept them when many other places wouldn't accept them. And sure enough, the the French-speaking immigrants that were in the early precursor to St. Francis College, they really didn't have any other options, even for high school. And so it really provided a life-changing experience. And we continue to try to do that here in general. I would also say that the other two pieces, the New England College of Osteopathic Medicine, which merged with St. Francis College to become the UNE, the early UNE, and then subsequently Westbrook College in Portland, those two entities also had a big focus on access. Westbrook, for example, which was founded in 1831, admitted women from the day that it opened, right from the beginning, and that was very, very rare in the early 1800s to have any college that accepted women. So again, deep in our roots, I think, is this emphasis on access, and that's one way that the UNE of today is influenced by the cultural heritage of our precursor institutions. There is a particular thing that we do that is really exciting, and that is at holidays, at our big holiday party on this campus for all of the employees, the faculty and the professional staff, we call it our tourtière lunch. And a tourtière in French, is a traditional pork pie that the Franco immigrants brought with them from Quebec, and they eat it throughout the year, but especially at the holiday times. And I'd never had it until I moved here, and I'm addicted. I love it, absolutely love it. And there's all kinds of interesting traditions like that. But the tourtière lunch, so we continue to serve that, and in the speech that I give every year, I talk about how that represents and harkens back to the roots of our Franco heritage here at UNE.
And do you think that accessibility back in St. Francis continues to have continues to show in the education of people around in this area?
Absolutely. So we're very mindful of doing everything that we can to provide access to a really transformative higher education to people who otherwise might not have that opportunity. People like me, I'm a first-generation college student. I was the first in my family to go to college. So at UNE now, a third of our undergraduate students are first-generation students, fully a third. 24% of our students this year are Pell eligible, meaning that they come from very modest financial backgrounds. So one of the kinds of diversity that we pride ourselves on is not just, when people think of diversity, they think of racial or ethnic diversity, and that's also very important. And we've worked hard to increase the percentage of students from minority racial backgrounds here at UNE. But we conceptualize diversity more broadly than that to also include socioeconomic diversity, diversity of viewpoint, ideological diversity, and diversity of in terms of the first generation piece as well. And so all of that is to provide access, and we do that through offering robust scholarships. That's my number one fundraising priority when I'm out meeting with donors, is to fundraise for more scholarships for students. So we've made a lot of progress. We still have room to grow. I'm always looking for more scholarships to help make the UNE education accessible. But yeah, it's a big part of what we do, and I think that goes right back to our DNA and our roots with St. Francis College and Westbrook and the New England College of Osteopathic Medicine.
Do you think UNE plays an important role in preserving the culture in Biddeford, being such a big part of Biddeford?
I think so. I do think so. For example, there's the La Kermesse. The Kermesse is a Franco-American festival every summer, and we always promote it here on campus, and we encourage students to go to it. As I mentioned before, with the tourtière lunch and at the holiday time, and the speeches that I give to kind of keep that alive, we've hosted the Franco-American Cultural Center in Biddeford. We've hosted them on campus and have them, given talks. There's a group that comes every year that traces the immigration of the Franco community, and they point to places right here on campus that were influential in that regard. So yeah, we absolutely try to be mindful, try to do things like that help keep that alive. We have a room, the St. Francis College here on campus, where it's named the St. Francis Room, and we have artifacts from the early days of St. Francis College. And in fact, there's a new project I don't think anybody even knows about this yet, that either this month or next month, I'm not sure when it's going to be done, we're putting up a large collage of all the past presidents of St. Francis College. We haven't had a collection of those, so we've had to go through the archives and find images from all the presidents, and we're putting them all up together and putting them down there in the St. Francis room. So these are just small ways that we try to do our part to keep the memory alive.
And I'm curious, you mentioned spots on campus being like a major point of entry for Franco-Americans. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I unfortunately am not an expert on those, but I do know that there are a couple of cemeteries on campus that where some of the priests are buried, and so we keep those up and keep them alive, and I know people go to those. There is actually, this is an interesting piece. Samuel de Champagne, who came, a French explorer who came, he landed right on campus, and we've done an archaeological dig at Freddy Beach. So he landed when he was exploring this area, and there's historical records documenting this at Freddy Beach. And so we've had archaeological digs there, and they found evidence of his being here. So that's another one that's kind of cool. So yeah, it's really a very historic place. You know, I think you wouldn't necessarily think about that as you're walking around campus, but if you sort of look in the corners here and there. We also have an outside, it's like what do you call it? Not a gazebo, but next to St. Francis College, that little area, you know what I'm talking about, that's outside. It's called St. Francis something. It's like a patio kind of area. It's a little bit hidden, very secluded, and it's a beautiful view. One of my favorite spots on campus. And so, yeah, just another spot that we have.
And talking about higher education overall, what do you think the importance of higher education is when it comes to preserving cultural heritage?
It's a great point. Higher ed, we have an obligation to do a much better job of helping students understand history in general, right? It's really appalling when you've seen on YouTube these videos of people saying like, who won the Civil War? You know, people are like, I don't know, France? You know, they don't even know what the Civil War was. Or who did the United States win its independence from? What country? And people are like, I don't know, Puerto Rico? You know, they just like have no sense of history. It's really concerning. So we try at UNE to make sure that our students have some kind of grounding in history. And, you know, the history of the world, the history of our country, the history of our local community as well. So I think we have a very important role to play in helping students have at least a basic understanding of history. And I think that includes the local cultural heritage of our community, but I think it goes way beyond that, to include the history of our country and the history of our world, right? And right now, I do have concerns about political movements from various angles that have tried to either distort that history or to focus on, you know, only one particular piece or perspective on that history, which I think is wrong. And we need to really make sure that people, you know, the parts of our history and the world's history that are uncomfortable, not just the parts that are good. So, for example, believe it or not, in Maine, the KKK was very active in Maine. And it wasn't all that long ago. It was in this century. Well, sorry, not this century, the 20th century, the last century. The KKK was active in Maine. And back to our local community, the Franco community, that's who they were really focused on. There weren't very many blacks in Maine, African Americans, for them to pick on, for them to target the way they were in other communities farther south. But there were Catholics, and there were people of Franco heritage. And so they were the ones that they went after. The Klan was based in Saco, actually, and there was a famous story of them marching across the bridge into Biddeford to harass the Franco-American community here. And they were met with what's called Irish confetti. I did not know what Irish confetti was. Turns out it's rocks. They were met on the bridge by people expelling them, throwing rocks, saying, "You're not welcome in Biddeford." and they were forced to retreat back to Saco.
Wow.
So it's a fascinating story.
That is, yeah.
So, yeah, these are the kinds of things that we need to make sure our students understand and know about. They're hyper-local, but our commitment goes beyond that to include American history and world history more broadly.
Yeah. I also notice UNE does a great job of educating about Native American history,
Yes.
and specifically the Wabanaki tribe.
The Wabanakis, yes, absolutely. Another very important piece. And that history continues on to today. The tragic story of the Wabanakis, just like the story of Native American Indians in general, is very salient right here. I visited the Penobscot tribe. I visited both Passamaquoddy tribes. I've actually been on the reservations, talked to people, visited the healthcare centers, and it's absolutely a fascinating and frankly heartbreaking story.
What do you hope students take away from their time at UNE about cultural heritage and the importance of their own and other people's cultural heritage?
So, what I hope they take away fundamentally is less an identification with a particular cultural identity, right? It's like I'm not trying to get UNE people to leave and go, oh, I'm now part Franco-American because of our... It's not really that. It's really more the values that are instilled by the culture, the things we've talked about, the value of hard work, the value of genuineness and authenticity, the value of appreciating people from different backgrounds, that sort of diversity, and a broader definition of diversity across all aspects of human difference, including but not limited to race and ethnicity. So that's what I hope people take, is those values, as opposed to a particular cultural identity per se.
Do you hope that UNE students during their time at UNE learn how to appreciate other cultures in a different way?
Absolutely. I want people to experience other cultures in all of their diversity, right? And so it's something that is very important to me. So I speak French in addition to English. I am always working to learn, to advance my French, and now I'm working on Spanish. And I'm sort of, I guess you would call me conversational in Spanish. I'm not great, but I'm definitely looking to work on that. And I tell you one thing, one piece of advice for students, try to learn another language. There is nothing that will unlock an appreciation for a different culture than learning another language. You can certainly appreciate other cultures without knowing the language, but when you know the language, there's an intimacy of relating to people, to the culture, to the music, to the food, to the poetry. It's funny, sometimes I'll be talking to my wife, who does not speak French, and I'll hear a French song that I really love, and I'll tell her, like, oh my God, that's so beautiful, and I'll translate it, and it makes no sense in English, right? If you translate, like, the grasshopper, jumped on the water, and it's like it just doesn't even make any sense at all. But in French, it's absolutely beautiful, and so it's you can't really appreciate that without knowing the other language. But back to your question, yes, I absolutely want people at UNE to develop an acceptance, not just a tolerance, but an embracing of the diversity of cultures across the globe. We need that. Given how divisive our politics have become in this country, we need that more than ever.
One of the biggest attracting features here is the various opportunities to study abroad. Could you talk about how that opportunity, especially the campus in Morocco being the first American campus over there, how that opportunity has changed the way that students can learn about other cultures?
Absolutely. So, first of all, our students study abroad at 4 times the national average. So 4 times the national average, that's amazing. We have partnerships now. We have our own campus in Morocco, as you mentioned, our own study abroad campus, and it really is the crown jewel of our study abroad programs, and in many ways of the whole UNE experience. I strongly urge students to try to go to Morocco. We're expanding our footprint there in order to accommodate as many students as possible, and it's just the most amazing experience. And then we also have study abroad opportunities in France, Spain, and Iceland, and we're developing 2 in Iceland actually. We're developing a partnership in Norway as well. So these are amazing experiences where students can spend a semester abroad. There's ad hoc experiences. These are our own partnerships, and then you can do sort of an outside partnership that will help sponsor you. And we've had students study in Hungary and Latin America and various other places. And then there's study abroad courses where you take a course and then the capstone part of the course at the end is you go to Costa Rica or Belize or Italy and spend a week or 10 days in one of those places. These, especially the study abroad experiences, are really transformational. Every single student I've talked to that has done one of those experiences, they come back a changed person. They really do change you. And what makes me especially proud at UNE is some of our students have never been abroad before. So I've talked to students who've gone to the Tangier campus and done that experience in Morocco who have never been abroad, or if they have been abroad, it's just across the border to Canada, which frankly barely counts, right? And then we take these people, we plop them in the middle of this very different culture, and they just thrive, and they come back with a much deeper experience of appreciation for different cultures and the role of culture in shaping one's perspective on things. And so I think it's very important. I strongly urge students to study abroad. A new development that we're just getting ready to start, this is a brand new announcement, is a summer program in Morocco. One of the things we realized is that a lot of our student athletes couldn't study abroad because the training and everything that goes into being a student athlete. But now, by opening up a summer study abroad program, our athletes can go and have the same experience that the other students could go. So I'm super excited about that.
I'll share with you, I went to Morocco.
Oh, you did?
It was my first time going abroad as well, so I had that exact experience.
Yeah? Oh, that's awesome. And was it like life-changing?
Completely transformational.
Yeah.
I came back with a completely different major and a completely new way of looking at
And
people.
the staff over there, Dua, I just think the world of Dua.
Lovely.
She's
yes,
amazing.
I love her.
I think it really is a very special experience because
is.
students get to immerse themselves in the culture over there in a way. So the First Lady, Lynn Brandsma, my wife, and I were there in October and celebrating the 10-year anniversary of our campus over there. And it's just, I can't wait to go back again. It's just a magical place. So I'm so glad you went. That's awesome.
Yes, I agree with you. Everyone should take, anyone that asks me if they should go, 100% go.
Yeah.
And how do you hope, when students study abroad, how do you hope they look at people differently when they return?
Yeah. Oh, well, they do. I have no doubt that they do. But, there's certain things that you just sort of take for granted being an American, right? You just sort of take for granted that this is, the way things are. And you go abroad and people just have different ways of doing things. And you learn to respect that, and you learn to different political systems, for example. One of the things that was the strangest thing for me when I went to Morocco the first time is Morocco's a kingdom. They have a king, right? And it's kind of weird. When we think of a kingdom, we think of like the UK, right? We think of the Queen of England, or now the King of England, and they're very just ceremonial. They don't really have any power. Well, the king in Morocco actually has power, right? Now, Morocco is it's a kingdom, but it's also a democracy. They have an elections, and they elect people, but the king retains some very important powers and can intervene in important ways. So to the American perspective, the American way of thinking, that seems just bizarre, right? But they love the king. They have the king's picture everywhere, and everybody loves the king and respects the king. And I've had conversations with people who they say, and I say, isn't that weird? Doesn't it seem medieval to have, just by dint of birth that, you have a hereditary monarchy and that person has power? And they think, no, your system is weird. You guys spend like millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on every election, and you have these elaborate elections with wasting all this money. People hate each other. They're very divisive. No, we have a much more stable system. And you think about it, you're like, okay. Doesn't mean that I want the United States to become a kingdom. Not at all. But you at least have a sense of appreciation that there are other ways of people organizing themselves into a different body politic, and that's okay. It may not be what we aspire to, but it develops, and that's just one example of hundreds and hundreds of examples that I could talk about. So anyway, But you understand what I'm saying because you were there.
Yes. And it is, you go and you're like, oh, everyone just loves this guy. Everything he does, they're
It's kind of
just
strange,
yes,
right?
it is.
Yeah.
I completely understand what you mean.
Yeah.
And are there any upcoming projects, or I know you mentioned the summer study abroad program, or dreams that you have about ways that cultural heritage could be further preserved here?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess this harkens back to something I already said, is I aspire that our students will have a deeper appreciation for history, a deeper appreciation for the many cultures that comprise our community here at UNE, and even the cultures more broadly beyond our local community. I think it's very, very important. And so we're going to continue doing whatever we can, to encourage the faculty to incorporate these kinds of issues in their classes. I don't have a heavy hand with faculty and tell them you must teach this. First of all, that would be a bad idea. They wouldn't like that. But we can encourage faculty to incorporate these things more. And then in terms of co-curricular activities, like our Office of Community and Belonging, certain student affinity groups and cultural groups, trying to encourage those, I think is very important. And as we talked about, the study abroad piece is very important. So those are all ways that we want to continue to strengthen that heritage.
And is there a cultural tradition from your background that you can look back on fondly and you have good memories of? Something that maybe
again, I wouldn't, I guess what I would say, because I wasn't raised with a strong specific cultural identity in terms of the traditional way of thinking, like an ethnic identity or something like that, then I can't point to a particular festival. I can point to one thing, though, which was early on, I started eating a variety of food, right? So my family would introduce me especially Mexican food, including spicy food, even as a kid. So I've just always grown up having a very wide palate, and I've yet to discover a kind of food that I don't like. I like every kind of food, including, really spicy food and all kinds of strange tastes. And so I tend that maybe that's something that continues to influence me. So when I've discovered there's two kinds of people, by the way. When you go into a restaurant, the kind that orders the safe thing. They order the burger or the salmon, just the safe thing. And then there's the kind that looks for the most unusual, strangest thing they've never had on the menu and orders that. I'm the latter, always going for the strange thing.
You've experienced probably a lot of variety coming from the South.
So let me ask you, what is the strangest food you've ever had?
I'm a very picky eater, I'm the person that goes and
the safe stuff,
I'll get
right?
The chicken tenders.
Right, got it. I'm the opposite. So the strangest food I've ever had was in Shanghai, China. I had pickled jellyfish, and that was okay. That was the strangest. That was the strangest food. Pickled jellyfish.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was.
Oh, that scares me. I don't think I could do that. And to finish off, if there's one story that the way you grew up, or a lesson that you learned growing up, what would you share?
Yeah, so I think it would be this. I've already talked about this, but at the risk of being redundant, I would say it would be the value of hard work, the value of authenticity and genuineness rather than pretense, and an appreciation for people from different backgrounds and different cultures. I look back and I think that those pieces were all there growing up, and and I would say one more thing, a little bit more specific, and that is the love of the ocean. So I worked starting in middle school as a deckhand on a shrimp boat, so I really developed a love of the ocean, of being on the ocean, and not just for pleasure but for work as well. And so moving to Maine, it's interesting, a very different climate. And by the way, I love the climate here much more so than where I grew up, where it's just so hot. But that love of, that embracing of the ocean and the importance of the sort of coastal community, the working community, that's something that was very much part of my background, and it's part of why Maine feels so much like home to me.
Amazing. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sitting down
It's
and
my
talking
pleasure.
with me
I
tonight.
enjoyed doing
was
it.